In this video, we will show you how to replace your front shock on this Ford F-150. This is part of your front steering and suspension located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. To do this, we're going to have to safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so both front wheels are off the ground. Of course, whenever you replace this part, you replace both sides of the vehicle at the same time. We're going to have to remove the wheels. To remove the wheels, just find the spot on your center cover that you can make your way in and behind, gently pry it out of place. Behind that, you're going to find 6 21mm lug nuts. Remove all 6 of those and the wheel. With the wheel out of the way, we're going to focus in the center area here. You're going to find that you have a small metal cover. Go ahead and use some pliers to pull that out of place. You do want to make sure that is reusable. Replace it as necessary. This one looks like it could use replacing. Behind that area, you're going to find a 13mm mounting nut. We can remove that. Now we're going to use a hammer and punch. The punch goes directly in the center of your axle shaft. A couple light taps, we just want to get some movement from this area. It's time to disconnect the outer tie rod end from the steering knuckle. You're going to find a 21mm mounting nut. Let's remove that. Just a quick inspection of that hardware. Of course, you will want to replace it as necessary. I'm going to start it back on a couple threads, and now we're going to dislodge that tie rod end from the steering knuckle. Now there is a couple different ways you can do this. If you have a tie rod removal tool, you can use that. Otherwise, a hammer with a couple light bonks along this area should cause vibration and break it free. A thorough inspection of the outer tie rod end to confirm nothing's damaged or weak in any way. This boot looks good, tie rod looks good as well. Once you have the outer tie rod end disconnected, we're looking along the back side of the steering knuckle, just above where your front axle is. You're going to find vacuum tubing for your four-wheel drive. For this, we're just going to gently pry it out of place. We'll give it a quick inspection, make sure it's soft and pliable, not torn, worn, or damaged. If that is the case, you won't have vacuum leading to your four-wheel drive. This looks fine. Let's set it aside. Now up along the top of the knuckle, we're going to dislodge our upper ball joint nut, leave it on there a couple threads, and then we'll tap on this to break it free, so we can eventually pull it out and rearward. This is another area you could use a ball joint or tie rod end separator. Now a quick note about once we do remove this and start pulling it away, you want to make sure you do not put a tug on the axle. That's the reason why we remove the axle nut. Now we're going to pay attention along the bottom of the front shock where it connects to your lower control arm. In this area, you're going to find an 1 1/16 headed mounting bolt leading from the front towards the rear. Along the back side here, you're going to find a 30mm mounting nut. Start getting this out of here. Now we should have plenty of movement down in this area. After confirming that, we're going to make our way all the way up to the top of the front shock. Now we're inside the engine compartment. We're going for our first mounting nut up along the top area here. Let's get our 15mm on here. We're going for the top of the shock tower. This is just below the master cylinder. Now we can make our way into the front wheel well. In the wheel well, Along the top of the shock tower, we can see our next two 15mm mounting nuts. Just going to start that one back on, a couple threads here. Now we can remove our final mounting nut. Now we can get that back off of there. We're holding onto our front shock and we can start removing this. For that, we're going to start down along the bottom. Just go ahead and start pulling it out of place. You can use a pry bar if necessary. Let's get this over to the spring compressor. Now that you have the front shock out of the vehicle, the next thing we need to do is get it safely into a spring compressor. We're going to be compressing our front coil spring just enough that we can make our way up along the top once we have some movement and remove our 15mm mounting nut. Now at this point, we have plenty of movement here, so we're sure we do not have spring pressure holding up against our cap. Along the top, we have a 15mm nut. That's tucked inside of this area. So for this, we're going to have to use a specialty tool. There are sockets that you can use, or you can just use a wrench. We want to make sure that it does have the angle that makes it so we can fit inside that area. Now for the tip of the front shock, you're going to be using a 6mm. That should fit right onto the top here. Now we're going to be turning the mounting nut counterclockwise. There we are. Let's just make sure we leave that on there a couple threads while we continue on, carefully pulling down on the front shock. Now we can start removing that front shock. If it does have a dust boot, you want to be careful not to cause damage to that. I'm just trying to work this out of position. There it is, friend. Now let's prepare our brand new shock cartridge for installation. We're going to take the very end of it, we'll press it down as far as possible, and remove our strap. At this point, we're going to let this completely expand. After it has completely expanded, continue on compressing it and then let it expand several times, at least 3 to 5 times. Let's prepare our brand new shock assembly for installation. You're going to find with the kit, it came with a brand new lower adapter. We're going to take this and we'll slide it all the way down towards the bottom. Now, of course, this can pivot. We're going to situate this at the spring compressor. Before that, let's pay attention to the dust boot and the jounce bumper on the original shock assembly. We want to swap that over to the brand new one. For that, we're just going to take hold of the shock, we'll take hold of the jounce bumper, and give this a little twist and slide it up and away. A thorough inspection to make sure that is reusable, it's not torn, worn, or damaged in any way, and we can slide that onto the brand new shock. I'm just going to remove that upper mounting nut. We'll slide this right on here. Let's make sure we got the dust boot going over the shock. Press it on there as far as possible. Now we can get this over to the spring compressor. Now let's start getting this in position. We're coming from along the bottom of the coil spring. As we bring this in, we're going to have to squeeze in on our dust boot and gently bring this up and through the coil spring. Just slide that all the way on there. Let's make sure we have the top aligned as we press it up. There can lift up on that as necessary. Now, one quick note about this top area, while I have that off, you can see exactly where the top of the coil spring would need to sit. Let's make sure that we have that aligned. For that, typically if you just try to turn this clockwise, it's going to eventually stop when it's in the proper position. Now let's continue on down along the bottom. We're spinning this as necessary as well. And at the top, it's time for the mounting nut. Let's get that on there. Now, prior to fully tightening this, we need to pay attention to something. We want to make sure that we have the front shock in the proper orientation. So we're looking up along the top of the shock cap. In this area, you can see that there's 3 studs. 2 of the studs are considerably closer to each other than the third. The third is going to be much further away than the other 2. Now we need to pay attention to that because the third stud, which is further away than the other 2, that would be what would be considered on the inboard side, closest to the engine when this is actually mounted in the vehicle. So now with that said, pay attention to the orientation of that, and we're going to make our way all the way down to the bottom of the front shock. In this area, we have our mounting bushing. This needs to be properly aligned so the mounting bolt that comes through from the front towards the rear through that control arm is going to be able to make its way through here. So essentially, we're going to have the top and the bottom perfectly perpendicular from each other. And now we're just up along the top. After making that adjustment, we can start snugging this mounting nut. Okay, so right there is bottomed out. Let's just make sure this is nice and tight. Now that I have that snugged, I'm going to torque it to 22 foot-pounds. We'll just take a pry bar across the top stud there. That should hold everything for us. Now after torquing this, and you've confirmed everything's properly seated as it needs to be, go ahead and remove it from the spring compressor and we can get this over to the vehicle. Let's get this over to the vehicle. Now let's start getting our shock in position. We're starting along the top first. We have the 3 studs. They will fit up through their shock tower ports. Let's get those 3 mounting nuts on there. This next one's the inboard one. You can reach through here if necessary. Now for the lower mounting bolt, I always like to use some red thread locker directly on the threads. We'll take that, we're going to align the lower portion of the shock with the lower control arm port. Slide that bolt through from the front towards the rear. Let's get this lined up here. Make your adjustments as necessary. Rubber mallet. Start on that mounting nut. We're down at the lower shock. For this mounting bolt, you're going to be torquing it to 351 foot-pounds. Most torque wrenches don't go that high. I'm going to use an air gun and drive it in. Now we can start bringing the knuckle into position where we can align it with the upper ball joint stud. We're going to flex the upper control arm as much as necessary, and we'll bring it into position. Start on your upper ball joint nut. We'll bottom it out. The torque for this will be 85 foot-pounds. Now you can remove support from underneath the suspension. After that, we're making our way along the back side of the steering knuckle. We have to reconnect our vacuum tubing to the 4-wheel drive hub actuators. Line it up, press it on. Once you have it on there, we're just going to give it a light tug, confirming it feels like it's properly secured. You can use a wire tie if necessary. Moving along, it's time for the outer tie rod end next. We're going to get this aligned with the steering knuckle. Start on your 21mm nut, torque it to 76 foot-pounds. Now it's time for the axle nut. For that nut, we're going to snug it up. The torque for this is 20 foot-pounds. To help prevent this from turning while I torque, I'm using a pry bar directly across these studs. Now we can install our metal protective cap. Looking along this area, you can see there's a ridge. I'm using an 1.1/8" socket. You can tell that that sits right on the ridge as it should. Now we can get this in position. Just line it up, socket in place, tap it on. Double check to make sure it's seated all the way around. Let's prepare to reinstall our driver's side front wheel. We'll get it in place and start on all 6 of our 21mm lug nuts. For the lug nuts, we're going to start each of them on. Once they're all started on, we can bottom them out. We'll get the wheel safely back down on the ground. Now with the driver's side front wheel down on the ground, we can continue on torquing each one of our 21mm lug nuts to 150 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Now if you have a center cover, let's install that now. For the center cover, there's one area that you want to pay attention to. You're going to find that you have this small prying area. If you were looking at the rim itself, you'll find that you have a notch to align that with. The notch is going to be located closest to your valve stem. We'll align this and tap it into place. Double check, make sure it's secure. With upward pressure on the suspension, we can continue on along the top of our shock tower. Snug those mounting nuts and torque each of the 3 to 35 foot-pounds. Gonna get that one inside the engine compartment. Now we've got those snug. We're inside the engine compartment. We've got our last 15mm mounting nut. The torque for these is going to be 35 foot-pounds. Let's make our way back into the wheel well so we can torque those 2 mounting nuts. Now that we have that one in there torqued, we're back out here, 35 foot-pounds for these as well. Okay, friend, we finished the installation on one side of the vehicle. Whenever you do this, you always do both sides of the vehicle and the process will be the same. After you've completed that, go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.